My name is Elise. I'm 43. And I cheated on my husband. There's no graceful way to say that. No ribbon to wrap around it. I wish there was God. I wish there was, because the silence that's followed has been louder than any fight we ever had. He won't speak to me now unless our kids are in the room, like I'm a ghost that only becomes real in the presence of witnesses. I'm not here to make excuses. But I need to say this out loud, to someone, anyone, because if I keep carrying it alone, I think I'll disappear completely. When Ben and I first met, I used to love the way he looked at me. Not in that cheesy movie way, but like I was solid ground under his feet. He was a quiet man, not much for words, but when we first dated, his eyes did all the talking. His hands, too. They'd settle on the small of my back when we'd walk into a room, like he was claiming me, not possessive, just proud. Like we were something special. The first few years were magnetic. We couldn't keep our hands off each other, even when we tried to act like grown-ups. I remember being 28, lying in bed next to him, thinking, this is it. I found it. We used to sneak into the kitchen after the kids were asleep, sip wine in our pajamas, laugh until our stomachs hurt. There were bad days, sure, but they always felt survivable with him beside me. But then, time, and babies, and bills, and routines that turned into ruts. I went from being his lover to being the woman who reminded him about dentist appointments and meal preps. I can't even remember the last time he looked at me like he used to. About 4 years ago, I noticed something shift. It wasn't loud. It was quiet, devastatingly quiet. A kiss that used to linger became a peck on the cheek, rushed and routine. His hand, once wrapped warmly around mine, now hung limp during family walks. He'd still hug me sometimes, but more like an obligation, like something on his to-do list. His arms would wrap around me, but his mind would be somewhere else. I'd press my face against his neck and inhale the scent of him, cedar, coffee, maybe exhaustion, and silently beg him to pull me in just a little tighter. He never did. I started to feel like a shadow in my own life. One night, maybe 2 years ago, we were lying in bed. The kids had gone to a sleepover, and we finally had the house to ourselves. I put on the lotion he used to say drove him crazy, the one with the jasmine scent, and I slipped under the sheets, brushing my leg against his. He was scrolling through his phone. I leaned in to kiss his shoulder, just a small thing. A hint, a start. He flinched barely and muttered something about being tired. That's all it took. I rolled away, my throat tight, my chest burning with shame. I stared at the ceiling for hours that night, wondering how I could feel so lonely next to someone I once couldn't get enough of. I told myself things would get better. That marriages go through dry spells. That I just had to try harder, be more patient, more understanding. I planned date nights, booked a weekend away once. He canceled last minute for a work thing. I bought new lingerie that stayed folded at the back of the drawer like a relic of a woman I used to be. Then last year, on a perfectly average Tuesday, I was sitting in the car after grocery shopping, one of those long, aimless pauses before heading back into the house, and I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't recognize myself. Not in the physical sense. I mean, sure, there were more lines around my eyes, more gray in my hair, but that wasn't it. It was something else. Something in my eyes. They looked hollow, unseen. That was the moment. Right then. That exact second. That's when I knew. Something had changed. And not just in Ben. In me. I had started to vanish. And I didn't know how to stop it. Of course, here's the continuation of Elise's story, deepening the emotional conflict and romantic tension as you requested. Ben's a firefighter. Has been for over 20 years. The kind who doesn't talk much about his day, just walks through the door smelling like smoke and adrenaline, drops his boots by the door, and collapses onto the couch like the weight of other people's emergencies has finally caught up with him. He's brave. Everyone says that. Solid. Reliable. The kind of man people count on. But I stopped counting on him a long time ago. It's not that he stopped loving me. I honestly don't think he did. But somewhere along the way, he forgot how I needed to be loved. He'd come home late some nights, reeking of ash and diesel, and slide into bed next to me without a word. His hand would land on my hip, heavy and automatic, and I'd go still. He'd start kissing the back of my neck, his breath warm, his body pressed close, but I'd feel miles away. Because he hadn't looked me in the eyes all day. Because we hadn't spoken, not really, in what felt like weeks. It wasn't the sex I avoided. It was the emptiness of it. Like I was a box he needed to check, so he could feel like things were okay between us. Like I should be grateful he still wanted me at all. I tried to tell him once. It was after dinner, just the two of us. The kids were at a friend's house, and the house was quiet. I washed dishes while he stood behind me, arms wrapping around my waist, pressing kisses into my shoulder. And I flinched. Not because it hurt, but because I wanted to feel something and couldn't. I need more than this, I said, quietly. Not angry. Just tired. He froze. His hands slipped from my waist like I'd burned him. What do you mean? He asked, his voice already defensive, like I'd accused him of something unforgivable. I mean, I turned, drying my hands on a towel. You come home, and you touch me, but you haven't even asked how I'm doing. You don't really talk to me anymore. I miss us, Ben. He shook his head and gave that half-laugh he always did when he was uncomfortable. I show up. I come home every night. I help with the kids. I try to touch you, and you pull away. I don't know what else you want from me. I want to feel seen, I said, my voice catching. Not just touched. I want you to know me again. His jaw clenched. He nodded, slow and sharp, like a door closing. Right. Okay. So it's me. No, I whispered. It's us. But he was already walking away. Later that night, he pulled me into bed again, tried to touch me like nothing had happened. I let him. I let him because I didn't want to fight. I let him because I thought maybe if I gave him what he needed, he'd give me what I needed next time. But afterward, when he fell asleep beside me with his arm draped across my stomach, I stared at the ceiling and felt lonelier than I ever had. Not unloved. Just unknown. And I think that's what started to break me. Not the silence. Not the sex. Not even the distance. But the fact that I was slowly vanishing and he didn't even notice. It was a Saturday morning, one of those rare ones where we didn't have a game or a birthday party or a grocery list bleeding into every corner of our plans. The kids were still sleeping in, and the sun was coming through the curtains soft and golden. Ben was already up, making coffee. I heard the clink of the mug before I smelled the French roast. He brought a cup to the nightstand without saying much, just the way he always used to, quiet love, no fanfare. Thought you might want this before it goes cold, he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. Thanks, I murmured, taking it. My fingers brushed his, and he smiled. That small, boyish smile that used to unravel me. He watched me for a moment, like he was trying to find his way back in. Then, slowly, he leaned in and kissed me, soft, familiar. Lips slightly chapped. His hand found my leg under the blanket, then traveled up toward my hip. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. But inside, something clenched, not desire, not warmth. Just tension. He deepened the kiss, hand slipping around to cut my backside in that casual, possessive way he used to do when we were younger. Back when it made me laugh, or gasp, or melt. This time, I flinched. It was tiny, barely more than a twitch, but he felt it. He pulled back just enough to look at me, brow furrowed. What? He asked, his voice low. Did I do something wrong? I shook my head too fast, smiling like it didn't matter. No, I'm still waking up. That's all. He gave a small sigh and nodded, but I could feel the distance stretch between us like rubber about to snap. Still, he leaned in and kissed my forehead, tender, patient, and left me there, sitting in our bed, holding lukewarm coffee and shame. The thing is, I wanted to want it. I missed feeling close to him. Missed his body against mine, his breath in my ear. But lately, every time he touched me like that, I didn't feel desired. I felt responsible. Like it was my job to react the right way, to make him feel wanted so he wouldn't drift further away. And that kind of pressure? It crushed every ounce of real connection. Some nights I'd lie in bed and play it out in my head, what I'd say if I had the guts. Can we just hold each other without it turning into something else? Can we talk first? Laugh? Touch for the sake of touching, not just because it leads somewhere? But I never said it, because I didn't want to hurt him, or worse, be rejected again. So instead, I drank my coffee, listening to the sounds of him moving through the house. The clatter of dishes, the creak of the stairs. The man I once ran to, now just a ghost in the next room. I stared at the wall, heart thudding in that hollow, familiar rhythm. Why does everything have to turn into sex? It happened on a Thursday. Nothing catastrophic. Just lasagna. Ben had come home early, which was rare, and cooked dinner. The kids were at his sister's for the evening, and the house was unusually still. He even lit a candle. One of the ones we kept for company but never actually used. He was trying. I saw it. He opened a bottle of wine, poured me a glass, and sat down across from me, smiling that tired but hopeful smile. Figured we could use a night to ourselves. I nodded, twisting the stem of the wine glass in my hand. Yeah, thanks. We talked about the kids. Work. The usual. And then, in a moment that might have been sweet once, could have been, years ago, he reached across the table and brushed his fingers over my wrist. I miss us, he said quietly. I miss touching you without it feeling like I'm crossing a line. I looked up from my plate, and something inside me cracked open. You don't get to miss me, I said, the words tumbling out sharp, louder than I meant. He blinked. What? You miss us? Then, where have you been the past 5 years? You walk around like everything's fine, like throwing your hand on my leg or kissing me in the hallway means we're okay. But you don't see me. You haven't seen me in so long, I don't even know what I look like in your eyes anymore. He stared at me, jaw tightening. I cook, I clean, I work my ass off. I come home to you every night. I try to kiss you, touch you, and you pull away like I'm some stranger. What else am I supposed to do, Elise? I need you to talk to me. My voice cracked, the tears rising fast. To notice me when I walk in the room. Not just grab my ass in the kitchen or kiss me before bed like it's part of your goddamn routine. He sat back, stunned. So now it's a problem that I still want you? It's not that you want me. It's that you only seem to want me. When was the last time you asked if I'm happy, Ben? When was the last time you asked me if I feel loved? The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was thick, stifling. He pushed his chair back and stood, not angrily, just defeated. I can't do this with you, he said quietly. Not when everything I do is wrong. He walked out of the room. I stayed at the table, my chest heaving, hands clenched in my lap like I was holding myself together by force. The candle flickered between our untouched plates. The lasagna sat cold and heavy on my stomach. I should have gotten up. Should have gone after him. But I just sat there, staring at the wine glass, at my reflection in its curve. Why did I say it like that? Why now? Why couldn't I just keep it in? I thought of the look on his face when I said he didn't see me. Like I'd taken something from him he didn't even know was fragile. Like I'd betrayed something quiet between us that still wanted to survive. And suddenly the weight of the story, my story rushed up around me. I'd cheated after 17 years of marriage, and now he won't talk to me unless the kids are in the room. Because that was the moment, right there at the dinner table, not the affair, not the silence, not the distance. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just fighting for love. I was mourning it. The days blurred after that night. We still shared a house, but it felt more like a ceasefire than a home. The lasagna stayed in the fridge for 3 days before I finally threw it out, untouched. He didn't mention it. Ben went back to his usual rhythms, work, the gym, mowing the lawn on Saturdays like he was punishing the grass. But something in him had curled inward. I'd see it in the way he stood in the doorway of the kids' rooms a little too long at night, or how he'd sit on the edge of the bed with his back to me, unmoving, as if waiting for a signal I didn't know how to give. He didn't reach for me anymore. There was no more hand on my hip in the kitchen, no forehead kisses, no brushing past me with a touch that lingered too long. He barely looked me in the eyes. He didn't raise his voice or throw accusations. He just stopped arriving. Not physically. Emotionally. It hurt more than the fights ever did. One morning, I found his hoodie in the laundry basket, the one I used to steal and sleep in when he was on long shifts. I held it against my chest, breathed him in. Smoke. Soap. Then, it was like being hit with a memory of a person who wasn't dead, just no longer reachable. I missed him. God, I missed him. But every time I tried to say something, even a simple "how are you?" the words dissolved into guilt. Because I was the one who crossed the line. I was the one who let someone else in, even for a moment. Not out of lust, but out of starvation. And what do you even say to the man you've wounded in silence? How do you reach for someone when your hands still stink of betrayal? One night, I heard him laughing in the living room. Something on the TV. A movie he used to make me watch every Christmas. Die Hard, of course. His laugh was brief, surprised, almost boyish. And I sat at the top of the stairs, completely still, my throat tight. I hadn't made him laugh like that in years. I wanted to go down there. I wanted to sit beside him, to feel even the edges of who we used to be. To say, "I'm sorry." To whisper, "Please look at me again." But I didn't. Instead, I crawled back into bed, pulled the blanket up to my chin, and stared at the dark ceiling like it held the answer. Some nights, he'd sleep in the guest room. Other nights, next to me, but turned away. I'd lie there wondering what he thought about. If he replayed things in his head like I did. If he wanted to touch me but couldn't. If he hated me. Or worse, felt nothing at all. I knew I had broken something. But I didn't know if it was something that could be fixed, or if it was simply the last crack in something that had been fracturing for years. One morning, as he was getting ready for work, I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching him tie his boots. His shoulders looked heavy. "Ben," I said, my voice small, uncertain. He looked up, surprised, like he hadn't expected me to speak first. "Yeah?" I opened my mouth, closed it. Then I asked, "Do you want me to try? Do you want me to try again?" He didn't answer right away. Just looked at me for a long time, not angry, not cold. Just tired. Then he said, "I don't know, Elise." I nodded. Because the truth was, I didn't know either. The days kept moving forward, even when we didn't. After that morning in the doorway, things didn't shift all at once. No grand declarations. No movie scene reconnection. Just a long, aching quiet. Sometimes that's how endings come. Not like a crash, but like a slow tide pulling everything out to sea. He still made coffee. Still packed the kids' lunches. Still said goodnight. But there was a softness missing, a kind of warmth that used to live in the background of every small thing. A tenderness I could no longer find, no matter how much I looked for it. And I was looking. God, I was trying. One evening, the kids were at a friend's for a sleepover, and I was folding laundry on the couch, watching something forgettable on TV just to fill the room with sound. Ben came in from the garage, wiped his hands on a rag, and stood in the doorway like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to come closer. Then, without a word, he walked over and sat beside me. Close, not touching, but close enough that I could feel the body heat between us. That used to be a comfort. Now it made my throat ache. I glanced at him. His eyes were on the TV, but I knew he wasn't watching it. "Do you ever think," I whispered, not sure where the words were going, "that maybe we loved each other the best we knew how, but it just wasn't enough?" He didn't look at me, but he didn't flinch either. After a long pause, he said, "Yeah, I think about that a lot." Silence again. But this time, it wasn't sharp. It was just honest. I stared down at the pile of socks in my lap. "I'm sorry," I said, quietly. He nodded, not dismissing it, not forgiving it, just acknowledging. Then, so gently I barely registered it, he leaned over and kissed the top of my head. It was not a promise, not a beginning, Just a memory made flesh for a moment. That night, he slept on the couch. Not out of anger. Not as punishment. I think he just didn't know how to be near me anymore. Or maybe he knew he couldn't be without wanting what was already gone. I lay in bed alone, staring at the ceiling again, feeling the silence of our house press in around me. And in that stillness, I finally understood. He wasn't trying to hurt me. He was trying to protect whatever small part of himself I hadn't already broken. We didn't speak much in the days that followed. We became good co-parents, efficient roommates, civil, kind, but the marriage, the love, had cooled to something gentle but distant. Like a fire burned out long ago, and we were still sitting by the ashes, waiting for heat that wasn't coming back. I wish I could say we found our way back, that we rebuilt, that he took my hand one day and said, "Let's try again." But some wounds don't close in ways that let you stay. And so, one quiet morning, after the kids were off to school, I told him I was going to move out. He just nodded, then stood, and, for the first time in a long time, pulled me into a hug. No words, no blame, just that one last closeness. And then he let go. If you're still listening, thank you. It's strange, isn't it? How a marriage can hold so much history, so much ordinary beauty, and still become a place where you feel profoundly alone. 17 years. That's a lifetime in some ways. Or it was for me. People always ask why someone cheats, like there's a neat answer. A single moment you can point to and say there, that's where it broke. But it wasn't one thing. It was 100 small silences. 1,000 times I bit my tongue. The slow, aching erosion of touch that felt more like obligation than connection. And maybe the worst part, I stopped recognizing myself long before I stepped outside the lines. I wasn't looking for escape. I was looking to feel seen. And yes, I made a terrible choice. I'm not going to excuse that. I carry it with me every day. But here's what I've learned. You can miss someone and still know it's over. You can love someone and still lose them. You can break something without meaning to and still be the one who mourns it most. Ben isn't the villain in my story. He never was. He loved me the only way he knew how. I just needed something he didn't know how to give. And by the time I found the words, the damage had already been done. Now we parent side by side. We are kind. We are careful. But we are no longer us. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about the way he used to look at me when I walked into a room. Like I was it, the center. The answer. I don't think I'll ever be looked at like that again. But maybe that's the cost of losing yourself in a marriage and trying to claw your way back. I cheated after 17 years of marriage. And now, he won't talk to me unless the kids are in the room. And honestly, I don't blame him. 8.